You never imagine that one ordinary knock could tilt the axis of your life, but that's how mine shifted. Before I begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which corners of the world are listening to this story with me. A quiet Thursday morning, a half-empty mug of Earl Grey, and then him. The sound was firm, 3 deliberate knocks, not the quick tap of a delivery or the friendly jingle of a neighbor. Just a rhythm that felt sure of its own need to be heard. The house had been silent until then, breathing in the same lazy calm it always did. I'd grown into that quiet like an old cardigan that used to itch but now fits just right. My children were grown. My husband belonged to another chapter, one long folded and shelved. The solitude had become its own melody. Kettle hum, floor creak, the steady rustle of Portland's autumn through the windows. When I opened the door, the morning drizzle bent the light. A young man stood there, tall, maybe 24, rain dripping from his hair onto a worn canvas jacket. Nervous but steady. He looked as though he'd stepped from another lifetime and accidentally crossed into mine. "Hi," he said, his voice even but quiet. "Sorry to bother you. I'm looking for someone, or maybe something." My hand stayed on the doorframe. "Are you lost?" "Not exactly." His fingers searched his pocket and came out with a folded piece of paper. "I think you knew my mother." Something inside me stuttered. The air felt heavier, as if the clouds had crept indoors. "Your mother's name?" I asked, keeping my tone soft. Lena Denning. She passed away 2 months ago." That name, a name I hadn't heard in more than 20 years, slid through me like a chord struck after long silence. My breath caught. "Come in," I said quietly. "You must be cold." He stepped inside, glancing around the living room as if mapping a half-remembered dream. The space had stayed the same for years. Soft browns and greens, books stacked where they shouldn't be, last week's ashes still gray in the hearth. I filled the kettle automatically. "Tea?" "Yes, please," he murmured. As the water warmed, I found myself studying him. The resemblance was undeniable. The same hazel eyes threaded with gold, the same hesitant grace. Lena's eyes. My Lena, the girl who once made the world feel louder, brighter, impossible to hold. When I brought the tea, he was sitting on the edge of the couch, the paper resting on his knees. He offered it to me. "She told me to find you," he said. It was a letter, creased, worn, the ink faded to the color of old secrets. The handwriting was hers. I didn't need to read the words to know. Still, I did. "If anything happens to me and you need to know where you come from, find her. Her name is Nora." My throat tightened. The cup trembled slightly in my hand. I sat opposite him, the letter like a pulse between us. "She was important to me," I managed. "A long time ago," he nodded. "She didn't talk much about her past, but before she got sick, she started writing things down. Your name was the only one she circled. The room seemed to listen. The rain at the window, the faint whistle from the kettle, even the ticking clock, all of it waiting. I remembered Lena's laugh, the wild energy that drew people in and frightened them just as quickly. We'd met in college, shared dorm walls, dreams, and one reckless season that never fully healed. Then she vanished, no note, no explanation, just absence. She always said she moved around a lot, Caleb said softly, stirring his tea. She told me once she was better at burning bridges than building them. "That sounds like her," I said, a smile ghosting across my lips. Then quieter. She wasn't cruel. She just disappeared. He studied me the way she used to. Head slightly tilted, eyes searching for truth instead of comfort. She said that too, that sometimes leaving is the kindest thing. Outside, the rain thickened into a steady curtain, whispering against the porch. Inside, we sat surrounded by the warmth of things unsaid. "She died of breast cancer," he said finally. "Stage 4 by the time she told anyone." I reached out without thinking, my hand covering his. His skin was cold, his pulse quick beneath it. "I'm so sorry," he nodded once. She didn't want anyone to worry. Silence settled again, different this time, not empty but full. like the house itself was holding its breath. Across the room, the photographs above the fireplace caught his attention. He rose and touched one gently, a grainy image of two girls by a lake, hair wild with wind, laughter frozen mid-movement. "That's her," he said, voice low. "She looks so young." "She was," I whispered. "We both were." He turned the photo toward the light. "Did she leave because of something between you?" The question struck cleanly, not cruel, just honest. I walked to the window, watching rivulets chase each other down the glass. Sometimes people leave not because of what someone did, but because of who they think they'll become if they stay. Caleb didn't answer. He didn't have to. His reflection beside mine in the window said enough, two shapes blurred by rain and memory. "She talked about regret sometimes," he said quietly. "We all have it," I replied. "Some of us just carry it quieter than others." He set the photo down and met my gaze. "Can I stay a little longer?" "Of course," I said, and just like that, something shifted again. This wasn't only his search for answers. It was mine too. Outside, the storm deepened, tapping the windows with restless fingers. Inside, a long locked door in my chest creaked open, letting the past breathe. By the time the rain eased into a mist, the afternoon light had grown pale and blue, the color of old photographs. Caleb was still there, curled into the corner of my couch as though he'd been part of the room forever. His jacket hung over the armrest, drying in the heat that pulsed softly from the fireplace. I hadn't planned on company, certainly not the son of a woman I hadn't spoken to in over 2 decades. But the quiet between us had turned into something companionable. He asked questions in bursts, as if testing the water before diving in. "Did she always drink her coffee black?" he began. I nodded. "Always. Said milk ruined the honesty of it." He smiled faintly. "That sounds like her." We moved through memories as though walking a museum of someone we both loved. He pointing to pieces of the mother he lost, I pointing to fragments of the woman I once knew. I told him about the college nights Lena and I stayed awake until sunrise, arguing about books, about the future, about what love should be if you stripped away expectation. She was fierce about everything, her opinions, her laughter, even her silence. And then she was gone. Caleb listened like he was collecting puzzle pieces. Every story I gave him seemed to fill a small, invisible gap in his chest. He wasn't angry. There was no bitterness in him, only a quiet hunger to understand. "She was restless," I said. "Even when she was happy, it was like something inside her kept tapping to be let out." He exhaled through a small laugh. "I felt that too. She loved me, I know she did. But there was always a part of her somewhere else. That truth hung between us, soft but heavy." The rain outside slowed to a drizzle, a sound like distant applause. I rose to pour us both fresh tea, needing movement, something to occupy my hands. When I came back, he had a small leather-bound journal in his lap. "She wrote this," he said, voice low. The edges of the cover were frayed, a bit of string holding it closed. "I found it after the funeral. I didn't read much of it, just enough to find your name." He set it gently on the coffee table between us. I reached for it but paused, the weight of the years pressing against my fingers. The leather was warm, faintly scented with lavender and dust. "I think she meant for you to have it," Caleb said. I opened it slowly. The ink had faded in places, but the writing was unmistakable, sharp, looping strokes that belonged to Lena. I read one line before I had to stop. "There are pieces of myself I never gave to anyone but Nora. Not because she asked for them, but because she saw them before I did." My throat closed around the air. I shut the journal softly, like it might break if handled too roughly. "She never said things like that," I whispered. "She wanted to," he said. "She just didn't know how." We sat quietly, the house holding its breath again. The walls felt warmer now, as if even the past had drawn closer to listen. "You know," I said after a while, trying to steady my voice. "She once convinced me to sneak into the old theater downtown. They were showing a French film neither of us could understand, but she said we'd learn more from watching faces than words." Caleb's eyes lit with a small smile. That sounds exactly like something she'd do. She got us caught 5 minutes in, I said, chuckling softly. Instead of being embarrassed, she thanked the usher for breaking the illusion. Caleb laughed, quiet but real. She used to tell me life was a rehearsal for a play she hadn't chosen yet. That's her, I said, always testing the script. We talked like that for hours, about her, about him, about everything left unspoken. I cooked dinner simply, roasted chicken, vegetables, warm bread from the freezer. Caleb offered to help, but I told him to rest. He watched from the table, asking gentle questions as the house filled with the smell of rosemary and heat. It felt strangely domestic, a rhythm my body remembered even after years of solitude. We ate in comfortable silence, broken only by small memories. She liked storms, I said at one point. Said thunder sounded like the sky reminding you it was alive. She used to stand by the window during them, Caleb replied. Never afraid. After dinner, we washed dishes together. He dried while I rinsed. It felt oddly intimate. Two strangers connected by the absence of the same person. When the plates were done, he lingered near the table. I don't know why I came here, he admitted softly. Something just told me I needed to. You were right to, I said. Some things don't end until they're understood. He nodded, eyes distant. Maybe she wanted this, for both of us. The words hung in the air, fragile as candlelight. That night, I gave him the guest room down the hall. I changed the sheets, placed a lamp on the bedside table, and handed him an extra blanket. He thanked me with a look that said more than words could. When I returned to my own room, I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, the journal resting on my lap. I didn't open it again. Not yet. The pages felt sacred, like something meant to be read when the heart was ready. And mine wasn't. At least not tonight. Through the thin walls, I could hear the faint creak of the floorboards as Caleb moved around, probably unable to sleep. Neither could I. The house, once comfortably silent, now felt alive, its stillness filled with memory and meaning. Outside, the rain began again, light and rhythmic. Inside, I traced the outline of Lena's handwriting through the cover of the journal and whispered her name into the dark, just to feel it again in my mouth. The sound felt both foreign and home. Tomorrow, I thought, I'll read more. But even as the thought formed, a deeper one followed. What if I'm not ready for what she wrote next? The question stayed with me until morning. The morning arrived softly, golden light slipping through the curtains and stretching across the floor like a slow exhale. I woke before the alarm, the kind of waking that comes not from rest, but from thought that never stopped. The house felt different, not empty, not heavy, but full in a way I hadn't known for years. I could hear Caleb moving in the guest room, the quiet creak of the bed, the shuffle of drawers. I made coffee instead of tea, thinking he might prefer something stronger. The smell filled the kitchen, grounding the air. When he appeared, his hair tousled, the soft weariness of sleep still in his face, I handed him a mug. "Morning," I said. "Morning," he answered, voice rough with sleep. "This smells amazing." We sat in the same spots as the day before, two actors returning to the same scene, but carrying different emotions now. He looked more settled, like some invisible burden had shifted. I wondered if mine had too. "I read more of the journal last night," he said quietly. "Not all of it, just a few pages." I nodded. "How did it feel?" He thought before answering. Like hearing her voice again, but also like eavesdropping on someone who never meant to be overheard. I understood that perfectly. Some truths were meant to be whispered only to time. He reached into his bag and brought out the journal, its edges darker now from handling. A paperclip marked a page halfway through. "She wrote something about you," he said. "I wanted to read it to you, if that's okay." My chest tightened, but I nodded. He opened the book carefully, smoothing the page with his palm. Nora had a way of making silence feel safe. When everything else in my world spun too fast, she was the still point. I never told her that. I should have. I don't know what she saw in me, but she never asked for more than I could give. Maybe that scared me. Maybe that's why I ran. Caleb looked up. There's more, he said softly, but that part stayed with me. The words pressed against the room like a heartbeat. I swallowed hard, blinking against the warmth behind my eyes. She never said any of that, I whispered. I think she wanted to, he replied gently. She just couldn't. For a long while we said nothing. The wind outside lifted the dry leaves against the windows, the sound like quiet applause for something we didn't quite understand. I realized my hands were shaking. I used to think I did something wrong, I said. When she left, I convinced myself I'd said too much, or not enough. I replayed every word, looking for the crack that made her go. Caleb shook his head slowly. It wasn't you. I don't think it was ever about you. I know that now, I said, though my voice trembled. But it took years to stop trying to fix a moment that had already ended. He nodded. She wrote about regret. Not in a way that sounded sad. More like she carried it the way some people carry jewelry. Something small, but constant. I smiled faintly. That sounds like her. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying the journal again. I came here for answers, he said. But I think I found something else. What's that? Connection. To her, to you, to something real. I met his gaze, and for the first time I didn't see a stranger. I saw the echo of a girl I once loved, and the future she left behind. That door, I said softly, will always be open. He smiled, a quiet, grateful smile that reached his eyes. We spent the rest of the morning walking the narrow trail behind my house, where the trees formed a canopy of red and gold. The air smelled of pine and earth, the kind of scent that carries memory in it. Caleb asked about the town, about my years after Lena left. I asked about his life, what music he liked, what he studied, what kind of person he wanted to become. He told me he studied literature. I laughed. Just like your mother. She used to say stories were maps for people who got lost too easily, he said. She wasn't wrong, I replied. When we returned, the light had shifted again, stretching longer across the floorboards. I realized hours had passed without noticing. The quiet between us had grown comfortable, something shared rather than avoided. Later, while he packed his things, I stood by the window, watching the breeze tug at the last of the golden leaves. It felt like the end of something, but also the beginning of something else I hadn't yet named. I should probably head out soon, Caleb said from behind me. I turned. You don't have to rush. He smiled, slipping the journal into his bag. I know, but I think I've taken enough of your day. You haven't taken anything, I said. You brought her back with you. He paused at that, his hand on the strap of his bag, then nodded slowly. I think she wanted to come back, just through a different door. I walked him to the porch. The sky had begun to clear, blue returning in uneven patches. He looked down the quiet street, the same one he'd arrived on yesterday. Thank you, he said. For what? For seeing her. For letting me see her too. He turned to go, then hesitated. I'll write to you, he said. If that's okay. I'd like that. He smiled again, and for a heartbeat I saw both of them, mother and son, overlapping in the same light. Then he walked down the steps and disappeared around the bend, the echo of his footsteps fading into the rustle of leaves. Inside, the house was quiet again, but not empty. I sat on the couch, the faint warmth of his presence still clinging to the air. The journal lay on the table, waiting. I opened it to the first page, ready this time, but as my eyes fell on the words, my breath caught. The first line wasn't what I expected. It read, "If you're reading this, Nora, then I was right to send him." My pulse quickened. "If you're reading this, Nora, then I was right to send him." The first line trembled beneath my fingertips. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The words seemed to hum off the page, alive with the same warmth and recklessness that had once drawn me to her. I turned the page carefully, afraid of what waited beneath each line. I don't know how much time I have left, and I don't want Caleb to find only silence where answers should be. You were the one who saw me when I still believed I could be whole. I I hope he finds some part of that through you. The ink had smudged in places, as if tears or rain had met the paper. My throat ached as I read on. I used to think love meant staying, but maybe sometimes it's knowing when to go. You taught me that without meaning to. You always did things without meaning to. I closed the book gently, pressing it to my chest. There was no anger in her words, no apology either, just the soft clarity that comes when life is near its end and pretenses fall away. The sound of tires on gravel pulled me from the haze. I looked out the window to see Caleb's car pulling back into the driveway. For a heartbeat, I thought I was dreaming. He stepped out, one hand shielding his eyes from the late afternoon sun. I opened the door before he could knock. "Did you forget something?" I asked, smiling despite the lump in my throat. He held up a paper bag. "Lunch. I realize we didn't eat today." I laughed, the sound breaking like sunlight through cloud. "You didn't have to come back." "I wanted to," he said simply. We ate at the small table by the window, sandwiches and leftover tea, the kind of meal that feels like a pause in time rather than an event. I told him about the letter inside the journal, the way his mother wrote it for both of us. He listened quietly, eyes lowered but intent. "She always said she wasn't good at goodbyes," he murmured. "She wasn't," I said, "but she tried to make this one count." He nodded, thoughtful. "When I was little, she used to hum this tune at night. Never knew where it came from. The last page of her journal, it has the notes written out. I think she wanted someone to play it. There was an old piano in the corner of my living room, dusty but still tuned. Without speaking, we moved toward it. He lifted the fallboard and I sat beside him. The melody was simple, hauntingly so. The kind of tune that feels like remembering something you've never lived. When the last note faded, neither of us moved. The room held a sacred kind of silence, the kind that makes you feel you've stepped outside of time. "She loved you," Caleb said softly, still looking at the keys. "I know," I whispered. "And I loved her." It was the first time I'd said it aloud in more than 20 years. The words didn't ache anymore. They landed softly, finally finding the space they'd been searching for. He turned to me. "She'd be glad you said it." We sat there for a long time, the light slowly dimming, the air filled with that strange calm that follows truth. When he finally stood to leave again, it didn't feel like an ending. He hugged me, awkward at first, then firmer, real. I felt the strength of youth and the weight of memory pressed together. "Take care of yourself." "Nora," he said. "You too, Caleb." He smiled. That same mix of Lena's mischief and his own quiet steadiness. And then he was gone. I stayed by the window until his car disappeared down the road, the golden light fading into twilight. The journal rested open on the piano now, the final page glinting under the dim lamp. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it knocks on your door, asking not to be forgotten. I ran a hand over the words, feeling their shape, the indentation of her pen. The years between us suddenly didn't seem like distance at all, just silence that had waited to be broken. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, carrying the scent of rain and pine. The same rhythm that had once filled this house with emptiness now sounded like belonging. I made myself another cup of tea, the kind Lena used to steal sips of when she thought I wasn't looking. As I sat by the window, steam curling upward, I let the memories come. The laughter, the letters, the ache, all of it. They didn't hurt anymore. They just were. Somewhere out there, I imagined Caleb driving through the long stretch of road toward the horizon, her journal beside him on the passenger seat, both of them carrying the same quiet understanding. Love never really leaves. It just changes shape. I looked toward the door where it all began, the sound of those 3 knocks still echoing faintly in my mind. What a strange, miraculous thing it is, I thought, for the past to find its way home. The tea had grown cold by the time I finished reading her last line again. "You were the still point." I smiled, whispered her name once more, and closed the journal. The house at last felt alive again. Some stories don't really end. They just find their way home again. If this one touched something quiet in you, Like, share, and subscribe for more moments that linger long after the last word.